The Sporland division of Parker Hannifin proudly sponsors the Advanced Refrigeration Podcast. There are a lot of questions surrounding the transition to A2L refrigerants and a lot of talking heads disseminating nebulous answers. But when your technician is face-to-face with the first A2L transition project, where do you turn for real-world answers about this specific job? Parker Sporland's Virtual Engineer is an innovative online design tool to size and select the correct components for climate control and refrigeration applications. Get your A2L system flow and component selection answers in 3 simple steps. Enter your application details, size, and select products, then download your project files. It's that easy. Try it at absolutely no cost. Visit sporlin.com and navigate to the Resource Center. Parker Sporland, leading the charge.
Yeah, I've been feeling like shit. I'm still in Florida. I just want to go home. Good morning, everybody. Welcome to Advanced Refrigeration Podcast. You're the host, bro. Wezel and Kevin Compass. How was your week?
Exhausting.
Lots of calls this week.
Yeah, a lot of disasters, a lot of fires, including the 2 from last night. So
What happened?
last night, a condenser fan nicked a condenser, which actually wasn't that bad. That was less worse than the case with the suction header that cracked.
How do you crack a kit?
I don't know. Like it was a husband case with the 4 or 5 return lines coming back into that 7/8 header they have. What cracked the bottom tube that the distributor's in front of. It took me an hour just to get the torch in there to get to it.
Case, not like
Yeah,
a
case.
hanging evaporator.
A case. So like a RLN 5-door. And then everything came in on that side. So it was just super tight. So I ended up having to pull the case next to it and lay inside of it and to get the torch in there.
Well, that sounds fun.
Oh, it was awful. And it was sticky. Like it was just blowing everywhere. So I was helping out last night. And yeah, that was a mother. Like it was small leak. I threw it in hot gas and it was just blowing.
Oh, so even the cases were hot gas?
Yeah.
Just regular HFC, I guess?
Yeah, just regular HFC. Just absolutely fucking blowing. And it had to be the bottom tube. Like every other tube I could have gotten to and fixed in 2 seconds. But the bottom tube had all the distributors laying right in front of it. So, yeah, I was in there. And the only tip I had was a 15 tip. So, trying not to set the whole case on fire.
You can weasel it down a little bit.
I had it down as far as I can go. Yeah.
And it starts warming up that tip real nice.
Yeah. Then I didn't realize this, but the acetylene regulator, like adjustment thing, was gone. So I had a bolt shoved in there that wasn't the right thread pitch, which stripped out.
Fun night?
Yeah. I haven't used my service rig in a while because, I mean, I'm on construction mostly. So we always have full-size rigs.
So it's all vibrating in the back of your truck. And so
Correct.
That fucking thing let loose and went God knows where.
Yeah, I haven't used that service rig in 6 months probably because every job site I'm on, we end up using a big torch because it's just way easier.
You guys are. Down in Florida, I was doing some kind of analysis on a system, and I don't know, because I wasn't supposed to work originally this week. I ended up bringing the family down here. They came down Wednesday night, so I had to drive up to Jacksonville International and then back, which was 3 hours of fun. And Went to work on Thursday. Got a little bit earlier, and then basically had off yesterday, today, and then we all fly back Sunday. So then as soon as I get back, I got to turn right back around and head towards the airport. Then I have to go somewhere else.
That sounds awful. I will never vacation in the South again during the summer.
Yeah, I'm rethinking this whole thing. I was just like, it's July 4th. Let's all get together. And it's humid. It doesn't feel nearly. I think it feels hotter here than it does in Dallas.
Oh, dude, we went to South Carolina last week. It was awful. So we're going to start talking about some basic CO2 troubleshooting / like hot weather troubleshooting. So we're going to dive into some like basic stuff. This will be like a mid to shorter podcast. It's because Brett's out of town and it's 6 o'clock in the morning.
Stop it. It's not 6. It's what? I got 7. Oh no, my computer hasn't switched. No, it's 7:47 here, so that means it's 6:47. So it's not about 6.
It's 6.
Whatever. All right, so you want to start with high discharge pressure trips and start from there?
High discharge pressure trips, guys. This one can get a little bit complicated and convoluted. So obviously, let's start with the obvious. Plug gas cooler. Yeah, it's got dirty gas coolers. Make sure they're clean, or you're going to have a bad time. Make sure all the fan motors are going, or you're going to have a bad time. So making sure that after a storm, you didn't lube in the EBM motors or those EC motors, making sure that they're running properly, making sure that the gas coolers that require water have the water functional, and you don't have any shorted humidity sensors that are causing problems or anything like that that are reading like way off. So generally on a PM, I will calibrate and check the humidity sensor to make sure that we're not having any issues with them, and make sure that the water is flowing properly or the pump is working. Now,
And you don't have hot water.
you don't have hot water. Now, let's dive a little bit deeper into this. Some head pressure issues. I see this a lot on guys trying to restart a rack that's been down, or guys trying to start a rack after they change parts on it, like they did an oil filter swap, and it's not starting back up. It's instantly high heading. So what happens is the temp sensor for the drop leg that's calculating the subcooling or calculating the pressure set point for the gas cooler ends up picking up a bunch of heat from the roof. I don't care how insulated it is, especially if it has a metal roof or a black roof. It's going to pick up heat from that roof. So what ends up happening is that sensor heats up like 90, 95 degrees, and it ends up raising the gas cooler set point to like 1350, 1400 PSI. And when this thing goes to start, the valve is so calling for such a low percentage, it instantly high heads, like within like a minute or two. If you don't have that flow going through the gas cooler, that mass flow, that sensor temperature is not going to change. So it ends up high heading until sometimes you force the high pressure valve open like 20%. And that allows you to get some flow moving in there. And then that sensor cools down because it has flow moving across it. And then it starts opening up the valve. And then it starts operating properly. But without that flow on that sensor, you're not going to get enough movement, and you're not going to get enough gas moving across it to change the temp, and that can cause you to nonstop high head.
Absolutely. Remember, this gas cooler outlet temperature sensor is what dictates how far that valve is going to be open. Kevin discussed when it's doing subcritical operation is going to try to operate at a subcooling because we know we can reconstitute into a liquid once we hit above the transcritical. If you look at the PT chart for Danfoss, if you're working on a pack controller, you can actually see that they actually have a PT chart that goes up above the critical point. That's where you can see what pressure it's going to try to maintain there. And then with an iPro. They have a calculated PT chart. Like Kevin said, if the pressure is, or if the temperature is, I think it's 90, was it 93 degrees, it's 1350 or something like that. And if it thinks it's hotter than that, it's going to try to hold back that pressure in the gas cooler. And like you said, without that flow, the possibility could keep continually going off on high pressure. One thing I would also make sure is like your delays on your cases aren't just sitting there and turning on a bunch of crap instantly as well. I've seen where it runs fine for the first couple minutes, and then all of a sudden it drops a whole bunch extra load on into the system. It turns on a whole bunch of cases, and that pressure just keeps getting exacerbated. We've also seen where the flash tank gets up to a pressure because it's been off for quite a while. And because that gas cooler temperature sensor is already hot as well, it's trying to hold back, but trying to bring on more compressors fast enough to bring that flash tank pressure down. And then in turn, it just to keep going off in high head, it's just a vicious cycle. So sometimes what you can do is bleed off the excessive pressure that's in the flash tank, which will help the compressors not load up nearly as fast, and then give you a little bit more time for that thing to run, for that gas cooler outlet temperature sensor to actually calculate what the hell it's trying to do.
Yeah, the other thing for those, I've seen some flash tank vessel set points at 580. So with those, if you raise the set point a little bit under the relief, it'll let it start back up. 580 is a little low. Like I'll usually go like 600, and that's where it stops the regulation of the high pressure valve to protect the tank. So if you get them where they're too low and it's hot out and they get shut down, that's where it becomes a bigger problem. So just pay attention to that and know what you're changing, but also if you have to, you're going to have to vent it off. And what also works is venting it into the suction if you don't want to lose the gas because you're already low enough.
Yeah. So what Kevin's explaining in some of the settings for both the pack controller and the iPro, there is a setting in there which basically if the pressure gets within, it's all different whoever's setting it, but if the pressure gets 25 to 50 pounds away from where the reliefs are in the flash tank, it'll actually start, if the flash tank starts being elevated, it would essentially open up the BGV and then essentially start closing down the HPV. A lot of times you could essentially, if you have a continual problem where you have high pressure issues, it could be something along the lines where you have a really excessive high flash tank pressure, and you'll watch it because like what'll happen is you'll have a pressure setting. It'll give you a pressure setting in there where it should be calculated at. And because the HPV is trying to prevent any more excessive flash gas from going into the flash tank, where it's actually sitting at won't make any sense. And then in turn, potentially causing the gas cooler to go off on high pressure.
Correct. You'll see high flash tank and high discharge pressure generally, then high drop leg pressure and high subcooling because it's trying to protect the flash tank. Now, that could be a myriad of things. It could be flash gas bypass valve isn't functioning properly. It's lost its position. It's you got compressor issues. I see this more than I see anything else. I see compressor issues. Guys aren't looking like they have blown valve plates. They got issues with compressors not working. They got issues with compressors off on oil. Suction's high. Suction's high, flash tank's high. Because you got to remember, we're bleeding off into that flash tank. Even though the set point's like 100 pounds over it, it's still going to affect it. So just keep an eye on those things. You shouldn't see flash gas bypass valve percentages over 80, 90%. If you are, there's generally a problem. Maybe the high pressure valve is shoving too much gas in there. You have an issue with the sensor. You need to check your calibration and your transducer for the flash tank. Make sure that is properly set up and reading. Make sure that there's no issues there. And then now we move on to checking sensors on the drop leg. Make sure that the drop leg transducer is close to the discharge transducer. Most guys don't carry around a 0 to 2,000 pound gauge, and it's probably not going to be accurate enough for that. So check it against the discharge transducer, check it against the iPro or pack controller transducer if you have two of them there. So make sure they're close. Remember, you're going to have a little bit of an update rate. Make sure sensor placement's good. Me personally, I prefer the controlling temp sensor for the drop leg to be at the rack. I prefer it to be indoors at the rack, insulated. I think it causes way less issues on hot restarts, causes way less issues with other stuff, and it's controllable. If you need to cool the sensor down with some duster to get the rack back going, it's a lot easier to do it when it's right there.
Yeah, most rack manufacturers will tell you they want it between 12 and 15 inches off of the gas cooler.
I have seen zero performance issues with the sensor being inside. We see less issues actually with the racks with the sensors inside.
Now, hold on, before you give that advice, are you talking about the racks that are easily both on the roof, the rack and the gas cooler, or are you talking where the rack is inside?
Rack is inside.
Oh, 30 feet down?
Yep. With everything insulated, rack and temp sensor and transducer inside. We see zero energy issues from them being up on top. We see zero energy consumption issues. We see zero performance issues. As a matter of fact, they work better. And you get a little bit of a buffer on the fans because you don't get that thermal shock of the fans just staging on and instantly dropping the temp, and it drops in 2 seconds, and then the fans are shutting off in the wintertime. You get a little bit of a thermal buffer there because that fluid has to make it back down to the rack. So it's not as reactive on the fans, so it runs a little bit better.
You're talking for both the sensors that are being operated for the gas cooler fans as well as the HPV as well?
Yeah, the pack controller is the same sensor.
Yeah. No, wait. Yeah, it is. Never mind.
So
Just do that for a second.
yeah, it depends how it's set up. Like, I prefer the sensor at the rack downstairs. I think it causes way less problems than it being upstairs. And look how many racks the sensor's been downstairs for 20 years. It's on HFC racks. It's the same thing. Just because everybody says the same thing, it's got to be upstairs. I'm telling you right now, we've moved a ton of them downstairs and we've had zero issues. It's stopped a bunch of issues. And then controlling off of your fans off of temperature anyway is just absolutely horrendous control.
No, we've been doing it that way forever.
Today's episode is sponsored by the RefraShield RDP Series differential pressure monitors from Westermeyer Industries, now available for transcritical CO2 systems in addition to other common pressures and refrigerants. When the filter element of your coalescing oil separator is contaminated, it can hurt your system's performance and efficiency. But how do you know when it's time to replace that filter? Wait too long to replace, and you could end up with a nasty filter blowout. But replacing too often can be a waste of time and money. The answer is installing a differential pressure monitor. The RDP Series differential pressure monitors, including the new transcritical CO2 model, are available now from Westermeyer Industries. To find out more information, email sales@westermeyerin.com. That's WESTERMEYERIN.com.
Yeah, I'm here to tell you, like,
Half
half the racks we start up in Chicago end up on pressure control, and they function 1,000 times better.
No, I get it. All right, let's see.
Here,
Also, with
let's go over strainers real quick before we leave.
oh god,
So on the high pressure valves, a lot of these have strainers in them. So certain Danfoss valves have strainers in them. Certain, I don't know what the GCVs do. I think maybe.
the Sporlan ones,
Yeah.
yes, they have them.
Yeah. So there's a strainer inside these valves. A lot of the OEMs are starting to put external strainers on these valves. So you'll have an external, like a Y strainer in front of it. These do plug up, especially if you have a really bad startup or if you're using a lot of TIG welded steel. You're going to be cleaning these. So make sure there's ball valves on both sides before you go to start them, because you don't want to have this down for an extended period. When you go to do these strainers, especially the Danfoss ones, make sure you have an O-ring kit. Because what happens is the O-rings swell, they get CO2 in them, and they swell and they pop, and they're impossible to get back in unless you freeze them with CO2 or put them in a freezer and shrink the O-ring back down to get it back in.
If ever you have to change one of these, make sure you have a rebuild kit with you, at least or an O-ring replacement.
They should be on site.
100%. I told someone this, and they were like, "No, I don't know what made them pull it out and whatever." And he calls me up frantic. He's like, "What do I do?" I'm like, "Shoot it with some liquid CO2," and that's exactly what he did to get it back in place. Not that we do things that we have to in a pinch, but it's not really the correct thing to do. We should just have a rebuild on site.
It sucks to have it, but here's the problem: you call up United for one of those, they aren't going to have it. Like, it's stuff you got to get from the OEM. They generally is having those rebuild kits, but yes, I've had to shoot the O-rings with CO2 to get them to shrink back down. It does work on occasion, but you're like praying the entire time that you don't rip it, put it back in. Cleaning these strainers, what you'll see with these strainers is generally high pressure, or you'll see high subcooling. When it's cooler out and you're running way higher than you should be, gas cooler fans are ripping, and you got like super high subcooling, and your valve is open 80-90% on the high pressure valve, generally you have a problem. I would start with the high pressure valve, make sure it's calibrated properly, make sure it's opening, and then it's probably plug strainers. They get pretty nasty.
All right, so wait a minute, because you said high subcooling, but when you say that, how are you figuring that on when it's running TC?
I said when it's subcritical.
Oh, okay. All right, so
when it's TC, you're just going to have just horrendously high discharge pressure.
Yeah, and the valve percentage will be open more, like you said, than where it would be. Good recommendation once this thing is commissioned initially. Make note of where it runs about on the average as far as when it's running transcritical versus running subcritical. Because a lot of people will ask, where are these valves supposed to run? I don't know. It's your rack. They're all going to run a little bit differently. Getting a baseline of where these things run when they are, like I said, running subcritically and transcritically, that'll give you an idea of where it should be running.
Subcritically is going to change as the temperature outside changes.
What happened to you?
What? So subcritically is going to change when the temperature outside changes, and then transcritical may change a little bit, but you should have a baseline. But look at a baseline when it's got food in the store, not when it's running with no food.
Yeah,
because that baseline number is going to change. So just be aware of that, and when you go to look at it, and you're right, like it should be a baseline valve percentage. Flash gas is going to be all over the place. It's going to go off rack load. It's going to be all over the place. I just started one. It's anywhere from 78% to 22%. The flash gas load is all over the place, depending on compressor load and evaporator load and everything else. So
wait a minute, is that the one that you have two valves on now?
Yeah, but the other valve's not operating.
Well, no, that's what yeah, but if they were working in sequential, they'd probably be working at the same. It was the way that it's programmed, right?
Correct. I have it to where the other valves would come into play till the original valve's at 80% for so long, or there's an issue with the flash tank.
Okay. So I just want to make sure, because if you like, in essence, if you would have a program together, and I understand your reasons for that, right? Because if you're having both those valves work in unison together, you're just wearing both of them out at the same time.
And they're going to move more.
Yeah, no, 100%. So my point being, if it was running the way that it probably was designed, you could have a baseline that on that particular rack that you're talking about wouldn't be jumping from the, whatever you said, 28 to 78% or whatever.
Yeah, if you have two flash gas bypass valves, the double iPro thing is not functional the way that they want it to work. Like, you can't have two gas or flash tank set points. Like, it's just not functional. So it ends up fighting. You have two PID loops fighting each other. So what I ended up doing on one of these is taking a Danfoss driver, and I ended up taking the AO2 from the iPro and feeding it to the Danfoss driver. So the EKE one is just driving the secondary flash gas bypass valve, matches the primary valve.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's an enable signal from a flex combiner that's looking at flash tank pressure, valve percentage, and outside air. So if the outside air is above 95 degrees, meaning like we're full on transcritical, and the valve percentage is above a certain threshold, it's going to enable the second valve and allow the second valve to come on and bring the percentage down and allow it to, they're going to both function together instead of having one flash tank set point at 420 or 525 and one at 415. And now you got two P bands and I bands fighting each other. And that's going to make for poor performance every time.
Gotcha. All right, so back to what you were saying with the strainers. Sorry, we like totally segued over there. So you said high subcooling, high temperature, and then you'll see the HVV will be a very high percentage, higher than normal, and usually hits the max. In a lot of these controllers, they won't allow the valve. Some of it depends on who put it in. Sometimes they won't let them put up greater than 85% or whatever. But go ahead and continue. Sorry.
I generally limit them at 85%. I'll watch it run and I'll limit it at 85% ish.
What's the reason for it? What's your reason for that? I just want to know.
Because if they open to 100% while they're running, it's usually bad. And then I don't want the PID to run away and something happen and it does open to 100% and it doesn't react fast enough. That all stemmed from the target issues with the changeover in the original iPro, where they had the original iPro and when it would switch from subcritical to transcritical, before it would switch back, it would lock the valve, or it would lock the valve at such a low set point, like in the 9s for the transcritical switchback, and it would just open the high pressure valve all the way, trying to get the pressure down, and it would just send the flash tank to Jesus.
Gotcha.
So that's where we started limiting the high pressure valves a little bit. And some of them, if they're too big, it just limits the PID range a little bit.
But that you'd have to know with actually calculating the load. And
yeah, or watching it. If you're watching this thing and over a year, and man, this thing really doesn't ever go above 50%. So I don't really need it to be above 65%.
Gotcha. Right. So let's talk about why a compressor blowing by would essentially cause a high discharge pressure. Let's go over that in a little bit more detail. Obviously, you're adding a lot more load to the suction, right? So that's going to exacerbate the issue. You're also adding heat in the form of discharge temperature up to that gas cooler, which is going to exacerbate the issue because the hotter the gas cooler can only remove X amount of heat, right? So if we're shoving higher temperatures in there than what we should be, we're going to get a hotter gas cooler outlet temperature coming out to that sensor, which is going to force the high pressure valve to essentially be at a certain pressure setting. And usually they limit it at 1450, but that would essentially cause the high pressure valve to have a high pressure instance on there.
See, that's wild. I can't say I've ever seen that, but I'll buy it.
No, I mean, like I said, this guy called me on, it was last week, and they were having issues with the rack. And I said, what kind of discharge temperature you have on all your compressors? Because as well as I do, pump down test doesn't really tell you jack all, right?
Nope.
Using the Bitzer online app or using the Copeland mobile app to tell you essentially what the discharge temperature should be. So that's what he did. He went to the Bitzer online, he calculated what the discharge temperature was. It was a lot more elevated than what it should have been. He isolated that compressor and his gas cooler. It wasn't tripping anymore.
Another thing, guys, if you go to one of these racks, it is down, it's tripping on discharge pressure instantly, and you can't get it back going, it's instantly tripping. And then you're looking at it and you have high discharge percentage, and your valve your discharge pressure, your valve for the high pressure valve is like, it's open 10-15%, and you're still just slamming. Start them up slow. If it's still slamming with one compressor on, it's probably not opening and either lost its position or the valve has failed or something's going on with it, because you should hear if you have 1,500 pounds on a valve and you're at like 400 on the flash tank's low, high pressure's high, you're not flowing anything in there. If you don't hear it whistling through there, like with the rack off and hear it bleeding down through, it's not opening. So before you start doing all of this crazy stuff, if this rack ran for a year, 2 years, it's probably not wiring issues.
It's probably also not tuning.
Yes,
Oh,
it's
it
not
needs to be
tuning.
tuned. I need to fix the tuning. No, you need to fix the issue that's freaking causing the thing to screw up.
It's not tuning. It may have tuning issues, but that ain't why it's down. It has a valve issue or a mechanical issue. So start and fix the mechanical issue before you start rewiring valves and saying stuff is tuned wrong. Like, start with the simple fix. Make sure all the compressors are functional. Make sure that you're starting this thing up slow enough. Make sure that the high pressure valve is actually bleeding gas down back through. Make sure it doesn't have a plug strainer. Make sure something didn't lose its position after a storm. Make sure the valve driver is functional. Or make sure the gas cooler is 100% functional.
Yeah, a lot of times. So it's on the BAC ones. I know for sure they'll show you what, which fan is on the little square, which at that point all of them should be on. But they'll also show you the amperage, and sometimes it's a little optical illusion. You go look and you're like, oh, it looks like it's spinning, because it's spinning in the opposite direction. You really can't see it. And then you look and you're like, wait a minute, these three are not pulling any amperage. There you go.
Yeah, and just making sure that the thing's not plugged. Like, just get up there and clean these gas coolers. These racks run like shit with the plug gas cooler. And then pull the pads down. Like, if it's a Gutner or a BAC, pull the pads. The coil's plugged on the inside. Yeah, it sucks pulling the pads off, but the coil's probably plugged on the inside.
Yeah, that's why that should be checked before summertime. When I haven't tried it yet, and I'm just thinking about this in theory, but especially on a BAC, because there's no dividers between anything, maybe wrapping, if you do have a bad gas cooler fan, just wrapping it. If it's all burnt up, that one's definitely not going to be coming on. Wrap the damn thing at the top, because all you're doing then is you're basically pulling the air through that one. And so instead of pulling it through the actual gas cooler coil, you're basically just pulling it through the other damn fan that's not spinning.
It works great for those. The Harbor Freight makes a belt drive like shop fan that fits like right on top of those EBM motors.
Is it waterproof?
It is when it's on top. I don't know. I ran a random gas cooler. I forget what name it was, but it was a random gas cooler. I lost 4 motors one night. It was all 4 motors after a storm. We had 4 Harbor Freight gas or belt drives up there in a sprinkler. Thing ran great. Kept the food cold.
And it did. That's the only thing that really sucks about these. Do you know of anyone that has these on the shelf?
No.
Yeah.
That's what sucks. Like, these motors are shit. Like, every power outage, like, they go out. I don't care if it's Gutner, if it's BAC, if it's Heatcraft, like, those motors don't last. And it's not like Europe where we can just go get those motors off the shelf. So they're coming in from Europe, they're coming in from Mexico. Like, they take forever to get.
Now they're probably at least 10 grand.
Yeah, I would much rather prefer a 1.5-horse motor on a standard VFD. Make it cheap.
You think it's because of the NEMA rating of the thing, because we're using more water to make real moist underneath?
I don't know. Those Heatcraft motors seem pretty sealed up for the they use for their ECM normally. I like those motors. They're just heavier than shit.
Yeah. Someone was asking me, they were like, should I crane it up? I said, I don't want to lift it up.
Yeah, dude, I'm getting a crane every time. I'm not doing that shit. That thing's huge. I'm not bringing them on the roof of the crane. If there's a lift there, maybe, but then you gotta get on top of the gas cooler. And if it's one of those BAC tower ones, like they're like 15 feet in the air.
Yeah, those big ones are huge.
Yeah, so I'm getting a crane every time. But remember, guys, keep it simple. Just because it's CO2 doesn't mean it's not easy mechanical problems. This is no different than DX in a way. The same way a holdback valve could plug up with debris and stick the piston. It's no different than that. Just keep it simple. Go back to normal mechanics. This rack was running at some point. It's not a tuning issue. It's probably not wired wrong. I say that, but like then I find stuff wired wrong in the field, but
it's not. But
it probably worked at one time.
To be fair, it didn't work. It had a mechanical issue, and then someone tried to rewire it. You know what I mean? That caused that issue. So that's a little bit different. But no, back to your original point. Yes, if it was working fine for X amount of months or a year, and now all of a sudden it decided to take a shit, chances are it's just something mechanical.
And it's probably something easy. Just look for the obvious. I'm lazy. I'm looking for the easy way out. What's going on here? What's the easiest fix to this? What's the easy? 90% of the time, it's something stupid.
Yeah, the only time you're going to look for something crazy is when it's an intermittent issue that's been going on for quite a while. We talked about these racks are supposed to load up in a certain sequence. It's funny. Europe, they'll knock them on all at one shot, all the cases, but then what they'll do is they'll stagger all the cases on the MOP. Something that hasn't been really for a while there. Like I'd see MOP set points and they'd be maxed out. So it didn't matter how high the suction pressure was.
I never max them. I set them low enough where they're not going to have problems. But also this last hill rack I started up, that thing banged down with the store at 85 degrees and it took it like a champ.
No, but you have an overabundance of load there. But in most situations, you want to make sure that the MOP is basically staggered. But think about it. It goes back to what we used to do on regular HFC racks, right? If we had in the middle of summer, we had a compressor go out. What do? We turned off the beer, we turned off the produce, and the rack load came down enough that we could still run the rack.
You turned off the beer, you monster?
Oh my God. Germans drink big warm beer all the time. Rusty said the same exact thing. He had a shit fit when I said beer. He's like, what do you shut off the beer for?
Yeah. Monster.
All right, what else do you gotta shut off?
The prep rooms.
All right, fine. Okay, the prep rooms. All right, then I'm gonna fix that whenever I say that in public. Prep rooms and produce. Shut those down. And then that way you had enough load to run the rack. The MOP essentially does the same thing. And all the case controllers, I don't care. It's Danfoss, RDM, Copeland, all the case controllers have an MOP set point. So as soon as the rack pressure, the suction pressure hits that pressure, it becomes elevated. It'll shut off those loads until the suction pressure is able to achieve. At least because we'd rather keep the rack running than keep elevating the suction pressure, which is going to keep elevating the discharge pressure, which would then eventually shut off the whole damn rack. Because at this point, we just want to try to keep the CO2 within the pipes.
The E3 has a kick-ass staging program in it. Now, we're with the E3 CO2, where like the E2 you had to make your own flexible combine or use like a very generic version of it. The E3 integrated one into the suction group of the medium temp is so much better because it's staging the medium temp and low temp and watching the flash tank pressure, and it's watching the suction pressures to make sure it doesn't overload. So it's looking at all three and it's cutting back the load, and it works fairly damn good. And it's very easy to assign. So you could kind of watch your BTUs as you're doing it and figure out start with some lower loads and mix some higher loads in there. It's very easily assignable, and you could stage it out for. I went up to 10 stages.
That's great.
And you could pick times between stages.
And there's delays in there too.
Yeah, so you have your delays in between stages, and if there's an issue, it drops back a stage to try to bring the pressures down a little bit. I think that's phenomenal. It's a huge improvement.
Yeah, I wonder, is it firmware versions that they have that in the more advanced section? Because I saw an E3 the other day. I was trying to show these guys. I'm like, oh yeah, it's right here. I'm like, Why
Only in
isn't
the
it there?
E3, only in the E3 CO2. And a lot of the manufacturers, the OEMs weren't using the E3 CO2. I think Copeland has pushed that a little harder now to the point where they're demanding that if you're using CO2, they want you to use the E3 CO2 because it has that application in there. And you're stupid for not using it because you have to already buy the iPro license, and it comes with the license for the iPro.
True.
It's just eliminating one more thing. Agreed. Now, the iPro thing, I will say this gets convoluted. So there's 3 different iPros right now. There's an FO4, an FO2, and an FO1. So an FO4 is the newest one. If you have to change out an iPro, okay, you say like from an FO3 or an FO2 to an FO4. So an FO4 is the one with the newest one that has 0 issues. It runs great. If you have to change one out, you need a new, if it's an E2, you need a new description file, you need a new license. If it's an E3, you need a new ADF file and you need a new license, and you have to reprogram it. So it's pretty easy. You just, all the menus are pretty much the same. So it's just dragging set points over and putting them in. But you have to get a new license from Copeland, and you have to get a new description file from Copeland.
All right, I have a question. Someone called me the other day, and they were like, "Hey, I want to change out this iPro to this other iPro. It's the same vintage." And I was like, "Yeah, you just need to change the address in the iPro so it communicates." He's like, "How do I do that?" I'm like, "The Visiograph." He's like, "What is that?"
Dude, Hill has not been sending Visiographs out with racks.
Yeah, that's what he said, and I'm like, "What? What do you do?"
So what they've been doing is the default address in there is 1 at 9600 baud. So since the iPro is generally on a dedicated comm loop with itself, it's usually address 1 on there. So yeah, or you got to log into the iPro and get on the web UI, and you could change the address that way.
Wait, say it again.
So you have to plug into the iPro like you would a Core Link, get on the web UI, and you have to change the address that way.
Use the USB to.
Yep.
What app are you doing for that?
It's not an app. It's web based, and then you get on there, and it's the same as updating the firmware in it. But again, just make it address 1, or get a Visiograph. They're considering the Visiograph a tool now.
That's ridiculous.
It is, because I think the Visiograph should be on every rack because it gives you a quick reference while you're watching other things. If you're watching the suction, so you could see the flash tank and high pressure valve, what's going on in real time on the iPro instead of waiting for the comm to update. So it should be mandatory that it's on every rack.
I don't understand why they would really.
Yeah, just to me, it's a safety thing not having it. If you don't have one, convince your customer on a PM, whatever, to buy a Visiograph and add it. It takes 20 minutes to install one. It's a 2-wire connection, plugs right in, you mount it, and you buy the Visiograph. It's programmed for the iPro. It's going to pull the data right off of it, and you're going to have a much easier time for this if you have to change the address to anything else. Because I had that problem in that store with that massive rack. I had to change the address. I didn't have a Visiograph.
So
I made them send me a Visiograph.
Oh, okay.
I could have changed it from the web UI, but why?
I agree. It should have one.
Yep, that was my thing. It should have a Visiograph. Like it should be there. But yeah, that's what's going on with that. Yeah. Anything else?
No, I'm good, dude.
Yep, I'm hungry. I'm gonna go eat some breakfast. Enjoy your vacation.
Yep. Talk to you guys later.
Yep.
Bye. Feeling absolutely just wretched. And sorry. Black. Bye.